Welcome back to Sunday Fun Day. I hope you have a good time, have some fun today. Be a good day for that. We're also about to finish up our series, Fixer Upper. We are in the 4th of 5 weeks on this series, and I think you'll probably agree that you've learned nothing new in this series. I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, there's nothing that's been shocking or earth-shattering we've been talking about. It's kind of the obvious stuff we need reminders about, but sometimes we forget the obvious, right? I mean, we forget the obvious thing, and that can actually be funny sometimes. And since it's Sunday Fun Day, there's some obvious biblical things that can be funny when you think about it. Like, for example, where is Solomon's temple located? Who said Jerusalem? That's kind of correct. It's actually on the side of his head, obviously, when you think about where his temple's located. Yeah, thank you. How about this one? Wait, I get it, Sunday Fun Day. Who was the worst lawbreaker in the Bible? Moses. Why? Because he broke all 10 commandments at once. Okay? How about this one? Why did Moses cross the Red Sea? This is easy, it's obvious. Get to the other side. Last one. If you need an ark, who do you ask? I know a guy. Okay, see, fun day. Sunday Fun Day. But these are obvious things we should probably know, right? And the whole thing about this series has not been to be a guilt trip or make you feel bad about stuff, but actually be a reminder, just a simple reminder to taking care of ourselves, to have this place of renewal and repair for our bodies, because it's all affected together. God cares about how we take care of ourselves, because after all, He created our bodies. And so all of us, at some level, are fixer-uppers. There is something that all of us, no matter where we are, what our situation is, there are things that we can do to take better care of ourselves and make better habits. Because God gave us these bodies for a reason. Everything we're going to do for God, our spiritual stuff, will be done in these bodies. We conduct God's mission in our lives with our bodies. So we want to have the energy and be ready and able to do those kinds of things. Now, if you're just joining us this week, we're glad you're here. And each week, as we got into this, we found out there's some deeper spiritual reality behind these very obvious physical reminders we needed. So we talked about, let's say, for example, eating, our intake, what we bring into our bodies. And we said, and we looked at that, really, it's about yes and no questions. What we put in our body comes down to yeses and nos. And it's much easier to say no to something if you're saying yes to something else. That's a spiritual thing too, right? What are you saying yes to? What are your goals? What are you after? What are you seeking to do? Instead of focusing on what you're denying yourself, focus on where you're headed, what you're saying yes to. We talked about sleeping and Sabbath and rest and how important that was and is to God. And if we're going to make room for rest in our lives, we need to ask ourselves each day, who do I want to be today instead of what I want to do today? There's always stuff to do, always things to get done, always a list bigger than we can accomplish in one day. So the real question is, who am I going to be? How am I going to accomplish the stuff I'm going to do by who I am? That's more important than what I do most of the time. And last thing we talked about last week is thinking. And having a focus and a filter for our minds. What do we think about? What's on our priority list as far as our thought life goes? What filters are we applying to our mind? Because all these things, eating, sleeping, thinking, moving, community, all these things we're talking about are integrated into our physical lives and our spiritual lives as well. They all work together. And we see a great example of this in the Old Testament, actually. We often look at the story of this guy named Elijah. You've probably heard of him. Very, very popular, big character in the Bible. And Elijah has a lot of physical characteristics to his story that we often overlook because we look at the spiritual stuff of Elijah. I mean, he was this great, revered, and honored prophet of God. He was about 1,000 years before Moses, or after Moses, and 1,000 years before Jesus. So he's kind of in the middle, right? Between Moses and Jesus, in the middle there's this guy named Elijah. And like I said, he's a very big character. But often the cases we look at the spiritual stuff when there's some really great physical things we look at with Elijah as well. He was very powerful. He rose dead people. He cured people. He caused droughts. Instead of dying, He went to heaven in a fiery chariot. Again, this was a very top-notch kind of spiritual guy. But he struggled just like you and I do. So during the story that we're going to look at today, it was a time in Israel when there was a very, very wicked king. His name was Ahab. Wicked, just probably one of the worst kings in biblical history. He had a wife named Jezebel. She was worse than he was. That's why you don't see a lot of kids named Jezebel running around. Okay? She's like the name, like the worst, right? And so you had Ahab and Jezebel, and they led people astray. And so the people of Israel who were, following God, that was their God, the God that led them out of Egypt, had now begun to pick up other gods too. And one of those gods was Jezebel's god named Baal. Or you may hear him called Baal, but his name is Baal. And Baal was the storm god. He brought storms and he brought rain. And if you were a farmer, what's really important to you? Rain. Huge, right? And so he thought, well, if I can get this Baal on my side, then I can get rain. And so that would happen. They would worship Baal because he brought rain. And God said, no, you can't have it both ways. You got to pick. You got to choose. Right? 10 Commandments. Number 1, you have no other gods before me. I got to be first. You're only God. So he sends Elijah with that message. They have to choose. And so God sends Elijah to Ahab. And tells Ahab, there's going to be a 3-year drought. For 3 years, no rain. Now again, who's Ahab's God? The storm god. And God's saying, I'm going to take that away. The very thing that you're worshiping, I'm taking away. And God does. For 3 years, there's a drought. And Elijah runs off, and he spends time in the desert. And people are waiting for rain, waiting for something to happen. At that time, after 3 years, Elijah returns. He says to Ahab, hey, can your God make it rain? Didn't think so. My God can. So they're going to have this contest to show who's really God. And so they decide to go to this place called Mount Carmel. So they're going to have a summit, if you will, a literal one. Mount Carmel is in northern Israel. This is a picture of Mount Carmel today. They go up on Mount Carmel, and Ahab brings 450 prophets of Baal. So there's 450 of them, okay? And one Elijah. Okay, it's this kind of underdog story. Elijah's by himself, all these prophets. And what happens is they decide that they're going to do this. They're going to have each get a bull. 2 bulls are brought forward, and this is Elijah's plan. You guys, you prophets of Baal, you're going to take your bull, cut it up, sacrifice it, put it on an altar, but don't put fire to it. Okay, then I'm going to do the same thing with my bull. And the God who burns up the sacrifice is God. Because after all, your God's the storm God. He's got lightning, so maybe he can take care of this for you. And they say, okay, perfect, that works. Well, whatever God answers with fire, that God will be God. So, now we're in 1 Kings 18. This is what happens. So they took the bull that was given to them, the prophets of Baal. They take their bull, prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, crying, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no voice and no answer. They limped about the altar that they had made. At noon, Elijah mocked them. So he's kind of like trash talking them a little bit here, which is kind of funny, saying, "Cry aloud. Surely he's a god. Come on, I can't hear you. Yell at him. Maybe he's meditating, or maybe he's wandered away, or he's on a journey, or he's asleep, and you got to wake him up. So keep crying, keep trying." Then they cried aloud, and as there was their custom, they cut themselves with swords and lances until the blood gushed out all over them. As midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation, but there was no voice, no answer, no response. Right, so they're trying, man. They're doing all they can to get Baal to do something, and nothing's going to happen because there's no Baal. Nothing's going to happen. They go all day long trying. Elijah's like, "Keep going. Got any more? Just keep. He's sleeping. Wake him up." He's kind of taunting him a little bit. And then Elijah is going to prepare his bull, which, by the way, he does by himself, which that's a lot of work. You ever had to cut up a bull before? Me neither. But still, it's probably a lot of work. So he cuts his bull up. He has to build an altar with big, huge stones. So he's lifting these huge stones and making an altar. He has to get all this wood, put all the wood on the altar. And then it says in the Bible, he digs a trench around this altar. So he's digging a trench. which you've probably done before. It's a lot of work. And then he takes all this water and drenches the altar, drenches the bull, drenches the wood until water's inside this trench, just full of water, which, by the way, makes burning things kind of hard. Just when it's wet. So he does all this. Again, that's a ton of work to do by yourself. And then he cries out to God. This is verse 36. O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant, that I have done all these things at your bidding. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. So don't do it for me. Do it for them. I want to draw them back to you. And God answers. Verse 38. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust, even licked up the water that was in the trench. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, the Lord indeed is God. The Lord indeed is God. And the people support Elijah, and they turn against the prophets of Baal, and they kill them, all 450 of them. And then in the distance over the Mediterranean, a storm begins to rise, a good storm, bringing rain to Israel. So this is a high point in Elijah's life. This is a huge mountaintop victory. He's like on the top of his game, on the top of the world. He probably felt close to God. His faith was at an all-time high. But what happens next? What often happens to us? Sometimes after this very high moment in our lives, this high point spiritually, there could be a crash. Elijah, this great, huge, awesome, powerful prophet of God, guess what? He crashes too. Because after this happens, Ahab's wife, what was her name? Jezebel, right. Jezebel finds out that 450 of her prophets are dead. And what does she do? She's mad. She's mad. And she wants to have Elijah killed. And tells Elijah, you're a dead man. Now, what do you think this great, huge, strong, powerful, mountaintop experience Elijah is going to do now when Jezebel is going to threaten to kill him? What does he do? He runs, which is kind of weird, right? He just takes off and runs. He runs from this place, Mount Carmel, which is in the north, way up here by Haifa today. He runs down to Beersheba, past Jerusalem. So here's Haifa, there's Jerusalem, there's Beersheba. 104 miles. That's like 4 marathons this guy runs. Kind of like Forrest Gump of the ancient world. 1 Kings 19:4. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and he came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. He said, it's enough, Lord. It's enough now. Take away my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors. It's like, you know what? I failed. I ran. I was this mountaintop moment, and I quit. I'm done. I'm just tired. He had this mountaintop moment, and then all of a sudden it just falls apart right at his feet. In some ways, there's, I think, a physical aspect that we overlook. Think about it. He did all that work on Mount Carmel by himself, right? Building the altar, slaughtering the bull, pouring the water, getting the wood, all that by himself. He runs 104 miles by himself. He is exhausted. He's emotionally exhausted. He's physically exhausted. He's probably hungry, tired, emotionally drained, spiritually depleted. He's just kind of done. Ever been there? You're just done, just tired. Can't take another step. You're just exhausted. We felt like that before. Maybe even spiritually, you feel like your prayers are like going this high. That's it. They're only going that high, and you just don't know what to do. You're physically tired, emotionally drained. You're kind of grumpy and grouchy all the time because you're just tired. Look what happens to the mighty prophet of God in verse 5. Then he lay down under the broom tree, and he fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, get up and eat. He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank, and what did he do again? Went back to sleep. God doesn't punish him. God doesn't say to him, hey, Elijah, what's wrong with you? Like, didn't you just not see what I did on Mount Carmel? Did you forget that? What's wrong with you, Elijah? You know what he does? He gives Elijah a nap. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do for yourself is sleep and eat. We have to take care of ourselves physically if we're going to be on our best game spiritually. So he tells Elijah, take some rest, get some sleep. And then he calls out for like ancient Uber Eats, right? Angel delivering, was it Blue Apron or Postmates, whatever it is. I mean, his food's like right there for him. God takes care of his physical needs because God knows they're connected. If you're going to recover spiritually, you got to recover physically as well. Our souls need our bodies. It's hard to be kind and patient if we're tired and exhausted at the end of our ropes. Well, the story of Elijah doesn't end with a nap and lunch. God's not done with him. Verse 7, an angel of the Lord came to him a second time, touched him and said, get up and eat. Otherwise, the journey will be too much for you. He got up and ate and drank, and then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. So he gets up and says, you got to get moving again. Let's go. Chop, chop. Got to move. And he takes Elijah from where he was in Beersheba all the way down to Mount Sinai. So Mount Horeb is actually here. It's Mount Sinai, or roughly somewhere in this general area, right? He travels from here to here, 104 miles, from here to there, 200 miles. Which brings us to our topic today. Sometimes you got to move. Right? We talked about eating, sleeping, thinking, and now we're going to talk about moving. If you think about it, Elijah had to do some big physical work in this story. Moving those stones, moving that wood, moving that bull, carrying that water, that's all heavy stuff. Then he had to take these huge runs, these big journeys, hikes. I mean, he had to be prepared to do all those things to accomplish what we have in this story. Moving is part of physical activity, part of our lives, and I know you're like, oh my gosh, here we go. The exercise talk. I hate exercise. Guess what? I do too. I think most people do. It's tough, right? I mean, exercising is a challenge. Sylvester Stallone, what's he known for? The Rocky movies, right? Sylvester Stallone, he wrote, directed the Rocky movies, which, by the way, Rocky 1 was Best Picture in 1976. Did you know that? Rocky was the Best Picture in 1976. Kind of crazy. Anyway, he said this, boxing is a great exercise as long as you can yell cut whenever you want. I love that, right? My favorite, though, is Charles Schultz of the Peanuts fame. He said, exercise is a dirty word. Every time I hear it, I wash my mouth out with chocolate. I like that one. But that's true, though, right? I mean, exercise is tough, but it has its benefits. We know scientifically that people who exercise 2 days a week are happier and have less stress. They're more fun to be around if they exercise at least 2 days a week. High levels of physical activity equate to 7 years of biological aging advantage. So there's these things called telomeres that are in your body, and when you exercise, it helps repair those things, and you don't age as poorly. It helps your aging process when you exercise. Decreases the risk of disease, helps your heart, makes you more confident, better in social situations. It helps your brain. It slows mental decline. In fact, not moving and sitting is one of the biggest health risks of our country today, is not moving and sitting down. So we know practically that exercise is good. However, it's tough. And so I want to give you some practical pieces of advice today about moving, how to prepare ourselves so we can do stuff like Elijah did, right? Run and carry stuff. The first thing I want you to know is this. Moving is an uphill climb, right? You think of Elijah going up that mountain, Mount Carmel, climbing that thing. It's an uphill climb. It takes effort. Quick story, I didn't even have it in my message here. I just thought of it. I went to Israel several times, and one of the times we went to a place called Petra. And in Petra, which is where they filmed Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, they filmed Transformers there. But there's this high place, an altar, at the top of a mountain. And it's about the height of Camelback, maybe a little bit higher. And to get up there, you had to climb basically Camelback to get to this altar to see this place, this kind of revered place. So if you were an ancient, you had to take animals up there with you. You had to get up there. What was interesting is that several folks in our group never got to see it because they never practiced hiking. They were stuck in the gift shop for that trip. Isn't that sad? To get all the way there and like you're in the gift shop, drinking coffee because you didn't prepare yourself for this climb. Well, here in this story here, that climbing that takes effort. So moving itself is an uphill climb. It takes work. That lever on your recliner, not exercise. Okay, this won't help you much, right? You need to move. I'm in the gym about every day, and people assume, including my wife Stacy, that I love it. I don't. Truth, like total honesty, I don't like going to the gym, and yet I run one. I know that sounds kind of weird. I mean, I'm much like you. There's always something to do. There's always something I'm busy with. I'm sore. I'm tired. Whatever. It's hard to get myself from my office to the gym sometimes, or from my house to the gym. It takes effort. In fact, at CrossFit Chaparral, we don't post the workouts until the night before or even that morning. Why do we do that? No excuses. You can't be like, oh, man, I can't do that tomorrow, right? I mean, we want you there where you can't leave, lock the doors, lock you in so you have to stay. See, Elijah teaches us something important about moving. It's hard to do it alone. He did all that work by himself, ran by himself, lifted stuff by himself. You need someone with you to help you move. When Nick Stavlin and I started CrossFit Chaparral 8 years ago, the emphasis was not on fitness. Most of you don't know this story, but 9 years ago we started this. Actually, what was happening is we were teaching martial arts classes here at the church. And a lot of us who are in the jiu-jitsu class wanted some extra work to just kind of get better at jiu-jitsu was our point. So there's a movie out at the time called 300. And there's a movie, 300 workout that went with the movie. You probably remember this little 300 whatever workout. So we did that just as a group together. Then Nick joined us. And he said, hey, I'm in the Army. There's this really cool new thing. It's brand new called, I don't know, CrossFit or something. Let's go check it out. So we did. We went to the seminar, read the books, got approved as trainers for CrossFit. And what really struck us was not the science or the fitness model or how they did things. It was the community it created. It was seeing people work together and cheer each other on and help each other and struggle together. That just kind of connected with us and who we were as Christians. And that's still the basis and the foundation of what we do today. It's about struggling together. It's hard to do it alone. But if people with you, it helps a lot. So whatever you do to move, go hiking, go walking, do with someone else. Be together in it. The second thing is this. Don't just climb up, climb deep. Right? Moving is a deep climb. The stuff we do is the same stuff we should do to be spiritually fit as well. Think about it. The things that you need to be physically fit, discipline, practice, consistency, all those things translate into our spiritual lives as well. In 1 Timothy 4:7, this is actually posted in the gym down at CrossFit. Train yourselves in godliness. For while physical training is of some value, godliness is valuable in every way, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. That word, train yourself, right here, is the Greek word gymnazo. Our word gymnastics come from it. Because discipline, consistency, commitment, hard work, all those things you need for physical training are the same things you need for spiritual training as well. Hebrews 12:11 says this. Now discipline always seems painful rather than pleasant at the time. It's true, right? Physical training seems difficult at the time. Same with spiritual training. But later, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. 1 Corinthians 9. Athletes exercise self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one. He said, athletes train, they do work hard. You should do the same thing spiritually. Exercise self-control. So, what are some things you can do spiritually? Well, we have the same practices. Prayer, fasting, meditation, giving, Bible intake. These things are the way we train. And the same disciplines that go into like working out and eating right and all those kind of things are the same that go into these things. The same disciplines apply. And Paul says so right here. You can even combine the two. Out here, just to my right, your left, this is a picture Andrew Langdahl took several years ago, thank you, Andrew, of the labyrinth. It's a walking prayer meditation tool. We think it's the largest one in America. Okay, it's a 1/4 mile in length if you actually walk the path. You can walk this path with a friend, pray, talk to God, meditate. At the same time, move and walk. This is an ancient practice, these labyrinths. Now, ours is very unique, which is really cool, but the concept is the same. A walking prayer. Move. At the same time, be talking to God. And the final point is this. You got to trust your coach. You got to trust your coach. Elijah's mission did not end when he got to Sinai. Right? He gets to Sinai, this 300-mile trip from Mount Carmel, and God speaks to him. God says to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answers in 1 Kings 19:10. He says, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." And now we get a glimpse of why he ran. It's like, I'm the last one. I'm alone. This is it. And God doesn't put off Elijah or tell him to buckle up, little camper. He doesn't do any of those things. He takes him back to Sinai. Now, what happened at Mount Sinai? 10 Commandments. Moses met God there. The burning bush was there. So in 1 Kings 19:11, this is what happens. God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting the mountains and breaking rocks into pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood before the entrance of the cave. And there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Now, if you read this story, like, what's kind of going on? Well, all these things, except for the silence, the earthquake, the fire, the wind, all those things happened with Moses. Like, God's calling them back to the very beginning when they started as a nation. But those things don't bring Moses, don't bring Elijah out. Those very powerful, big, huge things. What brings him out is the sound of silence, aloneness. And he comes out and God's voice speaks to him. That's why God's saying, "Elijah, you're not alone. You are never alone. I've always been with you. I've always been here coaching you along. Don't you remember that? How did Moses start? Me and Moses on this mountain with a burning bush. That's how we started. Just us two. I am always enough for you, Elijah. I'm always walking with you. I'm always moving with you." Elijah needed that reminder. In the silence, he was reminded that God was with him, encouraging him, cheering him on to be better and to keep moving forward. And he's doing the same for us. So how deep are we willing to move our relationship with God? Do we trust our coach? Are we going to put the work in to make ourselves spiritually strong? Discipline, consistency, commitment, dedication. Those things are important to us physically. They're important to us spiritually. Are we running the race to win a prize? Or are we running because God's running alongside of us? See, these encouraging things are so important to us. There's a study that was done. Dr. Carol Dweck of Stanford did a study about verbal cues of encouragement. What she did is she had 400 students, fifth graders, in New York. 400, that's a pretty big study of fifth graders in New York. And she divided them in half, and they took a puzzle, these puzzle questions, and they're relatively easy. But each group, when they finished, got 6 words of encouragement, exactly 6 words each. One group, the words were, "You must be smart at this." So, praising their intelligence. you must be smart at this. The other group heard, you must have worked really hard. 6 words each. One praises their intelligence. One praises their work ethic. With me? Now, after that, they went to the group and they said, okay, we'll give you another test, but it's harder. You can take a harder test or an easier test. Which you want to take? The group that was praised for their effort, you must be worked hard at this, that group, 90% of them wanted the harder test. The intelligent group, who was praised for their intelligence, they all wanted the easier test. Why was that? Because they don't want to be found out they weren't smart, right? They were praised for their smartness, so they want to keep that going. But the workers want to keep on working. Okay, then there's a third test they gave. And this test was super duper hard. And no one did well. The intelligence group, a group that was praised for their intelligence, they didn't like it at all. They were angry. They thought it made them not smart. And they're upset about it. The working group, they worked really hard at it. They enjoyed it, they said. They had fun with it. And they worked really hard at it. Then finally they gave both groups the first test again. The group praised for their intelligence had a 20% decline in their performance. The working group had a 30% improvement in their performance. What was the difference in that study? 6 words. 6 words. That's it. You worked really hard at this. Coaches say stuff like that, praising the effort. Paul says this to his protege, Timothy. He said, I have fought the fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. This is the end of his life. He says these words. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. He doesn't say I won it. I was first. I'm on the podium. Hey, man, he says, know what? I finished. I did the work. I did the best I could. I worked really hard at this. I listened to my coach. And then he says this. From now on, there is reserved for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. That's for you too, and for me. We have a coach that is cheering for us, that wants us to succeed and wants us to do well, who wants us to put the work in, though, too, to keep moving forward, knowing that he's right next to us, cheering us on. So let's keep moving then. Let's pray together.